Hello, TM24 here, and we are back for some more Marvel Snap content. Now, before the weekend here, I want to do a little meta review so that you guys can know what you're going to be playing against, maybe what you're going to play, and how you can beat it. So, we're going to hop right in. I was going to do 5 decks, but really it's kind of 7 that we're going to take a quick look at. So, I'll show you what the most common version of the deck being played is, and then show you what I play myself based on my preferences. So, first off, we're going to start off with a super popular one, the Sandman Electro deck here. So you can see you've got Sunspot, Ebony Maw, Electro, Wave, Jubilee, Devil Dino, Sandman, Arrow, Dr. Doom, Odin, She-Hulk, and Magneto. So obviously the idea here is to get Sunspot down on 1. Hopefully, maybe you're just letting him ride. Maybe you're playing Ebony Maw on 2, but then on 3, you're looking to get either Electro or Wave down so that you can hit Sandman, so you can get him down. So that is huge, right? So 3, you're going to get one of those 2 down. You also have other options here. You've got Jubilee to pull hopefully one of these big cards from your deck. You've got the Dr. Doom Odin combo that just is super strong. We've got She-Hulk in here in case you don't hit too much. Maybe on 4 you can slam her down, for 3 alongside a Sunspot, something like that. So overall, again, this is a great deck. It's going to slow your opponents down. A lot of people are playing Sarah's or maybe discard decks and they have a bunch of swarms. So being able to get Sandman down is really going to improve your chances of winning. So this is the most popular version of the deck, and I think that they've got it pretty much right here. The one card that I don't particularly like playing is Ebony Maw. So I typically take him out of my deck, and instead I prefer to go with one of 2 options depending on preference. I like Armor because we do have a few cards, mainly Devil Dino, She-Hulk, that you don't want to get hit by Shang-Chi, so sometimes I'll go with Armor. My other one is I will go with another bigger drop here. Let me see if I can find it. I actually like to go, and now I say big drop, it's only 7 power, but I like to go Vision. And the reason I'll do that is because if, Jubilee can pull him, we can reach other lanes that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. Maybe we just play him on his own so that we can reach those lanes. If we don't hit Dr. Doom, I like to have another option to hit, some of those harder to hit lanes, which is why I include Vision in my version. So overall, it's a super popular deck because it's a lot of power. If you do get Sandman down and then you hit your Dr. Doom, your Odin combo, you are just outpacing your opponent so easily that you're gonna win that game 9 times out of 10. So overall, I can see why people are playing it. It's not one of my favorite to pilot right now, but you can't deny its strength, and it kind of deserves its spot here in the meta. So first one, Sandman Electro. You saw the most popular version, you saw my version, and there you guys go. But let's get on to the next one. All right, the next one here, and I'm sure all of you are running into it on the ladder right now, and it is Patriot. We all know how Patriot works, right? We'd love to get Misty Knight down on 1, Shocker on 2, Patriot potentially on 3, maybe not. Maybe you're going Brood or rather Debris. 4, of course, your only 4 drop is going to be the Thing. 5, you've got Blue Marvel, and then 6, you can go with your big Ultron play. Maybe you're going Patriot Mystique on 6 if you've got enough power down. Additionally, you've got Wasp here, you've got Onslaught, you've got, Blue Marvel, Brood, Mr. Sinister. So we know how Patriot works. We know that this deck just, it puts power in every location, so it can be tough for other decks to keep up, especially if you get Patriot down with Mystique copying it, or you get Blue Marvel down and then Onslaught on top. It's a pretty good deck. I mean, I can see why a ton of people are playing it right now. Now, I've never been a big fan of Patriot decks, but I do see how strong they can be. But I've got my own version that I like to play. I don't really care for having Mr. Sinister in. You're only getting the one... let's go back to him real quick. You're only getting the one clone that is actually getting buffed. So, I find it hard to kind of see, putting him in that deck. I love Wasp, Misty Knight, Shocker. I feel like those are crucial. Same thing with Mystique and Patriot. You're going to keep them. Typically, I don't normally include Brood. I can see why you would, but typically he's not in my list. Additionally, I don't include the Thing, and I don't include Onslaught. Now, instead, I've got a couple different cards that I like to go here, and one is going to be huge, Super Scroll. With all the other Patriots you're running into, Super Scroll can feel like a huge addition to your game plan. Maybe they are playing a Sarah deck and you're going to get discounts. Super Scroll, I think, has a lot of viability in this deck. Another card that I love to include is Dr. Doom. Those Doom bots are being hit by your Patriot, so I don't see any reason not to include him. Now, if we're looking at these cards, one thing that Patriot really struggles with is when decks go tall against it instead of wide. It can't compete with a deck that just dumps a ton of power, and there's one really good answer to that, and that's Shang-Chi. I love having Shang-Chi in most of my decks. I typically put him in my Patriot variant, so this is how it looks so far. My last spot is kind of a flex. Sometimes I'll go with Onslaught because I can see his value. Other times I'm looking at other options here, right? I'm just looking through, maybe I want to try and lock something down with Goose to make sure that we can have the most power there. It really kind of depends on what your preference is. We'll look at the no ability cards again, and you can make a case for Abomination as well, simply because you've only got one other 5-drop in Blue Marvel, so sometimes he fits right in. I don't hate Squirrel Girl either, just because she can reach some of those other lanes. So really, it comes down to what your preference is. I like to go with cards that cost a little bit less because I'm relying on my Patriot to buff them. So a lot of the times I'll go Cyclops and I'll just have him tossed in there. We're kind of heavy on our 3-drops, but I like to run this version of Patriot over kind of the standard one. I could see the reasoning behind the standard one. I think it's really good, but I like to have some answers and a little bit of protection, which is why I run those 2 4-drops. So that's Patriot. I know you guys are running into it. You saw the most common version, you saw my version, but let's get on to the next 2 decks now. All right, here we are. You can see it says Sarah, Control, and Monkey. They run very similar decks. Just a few cards are typically changed in and out depending on which version you're running. So this one that I've got up right now is the Sarah Control version. You can see it's heavy on the 4-drops. You got Shang-Chi, Enchantress, and White Queen. Sarah for discount, Zabu for discounts. Of course, you've got Killmonger there to get rid of your Nova. If not him, you've got Carnage as another way to eat up the Hood, Nova, things like that. This version also includes Mysterio. I could see why, you're going to buff your Bishop, and if it gets hit by Nova, it feels pretty good. But ultimately, I'm not a big fan of Mysterio in the Control version. Lizard, totally get. Bishop, totally get. But, this is kind of that Sarah Control that they've got going on. Now, if you're talking about the Monkey version here, you're taking out a few cards here. You're taking out the Hood. You're taking out Carnage. You're taking out... Actually, Mysterio stays. You take out Zabu. You don't run White Queen. And instead, they do have the Monkey there. Now, some have Bossed, some don't. The ones that don't are running Scarlet Witch and Sentinels. And this is the other version that you're seeing people run as well. Totally get it. You can get a bunch of, these 2-drops out on turn 6. Thanks to Sarah, they're all 1-drops, and all of a sudden that's huge. Totally understand it. Again, I think this list is actually pretty strong. I don't care for having Sentinel in my list. I would much rather have that Bossed. And typically, I am not running. I'm not running Scarlet Witch either. I think there are better options. I understand the reasoning, but it's not a card that I like to have in there. Instead, I like to go something like Goose, just because all of our cards are going to be under that threshold where a lot of the times your opponents are not. So this is kind of my version of that Sarah Monkey as opposed to what they're running. I don't play too much Sarah Control, so if that's something you guys play, or if you have a couple different cards that you like to run it, let me know in the comments below. But I do prefer the monkey version of Sarah as opposed to the control version, and this is what I've run. So we've got Sarah Control, we've got Sarah Monkey, we've seen Patriot, we've seen Sandman Electro. Let's get on to the next one. All right, and it's the return of Modoc Discard. Very, very standard list here. You've got Sunspot, Morbius, Wolverine, Swarm, Colleen Wing, Mystique, Nakia, Lady Sif, Dracula, Modoc, Apocalypse, and America Chavez. So very, very standard list here. Super, super strong deck. The combination of being able to hit Modoc on 5 with Apocalypse already in your hand, and knowing you're going to draw Chavez on 6 is just huge. It allows you the option to either play Apocalypse or play Chavez, depending on where you need more power. And if you've got Dracula down, you're feeling really, really good. Morbius can get huge, so if you can copy him with Mystique, it feels great. Now, I like this list overall, but I don't typically run it this way either. Like I said, I like having answers to my opponents, and I don't think Nakia gives us the most value, so I typically like to have something like a Shang-Chi instead. Our only other 4-drop is Dracula, so I think you can make a case for Shang-Chi in pretty much any deck. Other than that, I feel pretty good about this list. I don't think there's much else I would change. Maybe one change I would make is Sunspot for a Nightcrawler, and the only reason I would do that is because Nightcrawler can reach some of those other lanes that Sunspot's not, and you don't have any other way to do that. So if you get a bad location, sometimes you can just lose the game with this deck because you have no way of getting there. Otherwise, you're trying to go tall in 2 lanes. That's why I like Nightcrawler for that little flex spot there. But totally can see the merit in Sunspot as well. So either or, but that's how I run my Modoc Discard. I do think this is a strong deck. We are seeing it start to come back now, and it totally makes sense why. It was running into a problem where the decks that were going tall, like the Shuri decks, were just too strong for these discard decks. So with Shuri being hit with a nerf, it's going to open up those decks that did kind of the same thing, just not as well, and that's what this deck does. So definitely worth giving a shot again now that the meta's kind of giving it another chance. And a pretty fun deck to play. The one thing that like I said, is it didn't have a ton of answers, which is why I put Shang-Chi in there. But again, sometimes you could just lose to bad locations depending on what you got going on. So pretty fun deck as well. Discard getting a little bit of love, so you can't hate it. But let's move on to the next deck here. And we are at the next deck, and I'm sure y'all have seen it. This deck is going to be strong for a while, and it's the Dino Hawk, Dino Dark Hawk, whatever you want to call it. You've got Korg and Rockslide to toss rocks into their deck to power up your Dark Hawk. Additionally, you've got Zabu because you have a ton of 4-drops. You've got 4 4-drops here, so his discounts feel great. Maria Hill, Sentinel, Agent Coulson, and White Queen are all refilling your hand to make your Devil Dino stronger. So those all totally make sense. Mystique, again, great card. She can either copy your Dark Hawk or she can copy your Devil Dino, depending on what you want to do. Shang-Chi, answers. Love that he's just a natural inclusion in this deck. And then you've got Dr. Doom to kind of hit 3 lanes. It can reach that lane that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So I feel like Dr. Doom is a great inclusion in this deck. Overall, I think this is a super, super strong deck. I can see why it's built the way it is. I run it slightly differently. Instead of, I typically don't have Maria Hill. I don't feel that the random 1-drops she's bringing you are all that strong. Instead, I like to go Storm. I think Storm is huge in this deck for a couple of reasons, right? She costs 3. So if you can get her down on 3, you have a ton of options on 4 of a really, really nice follow-up. if you've got her in your hand on turn 1, maybe even turn 2, you can play her on top of your Sentinel or on top of your Zabu or Korg, and then follow up with a Rock Slide, or maybe it's a Dark Hawk, and you're probably going to win that Storm lane. So I feel like this is one of the best decks for Storm. So I do like to include her. Otherwise, you know, I feel pretty good with the other cards that are in here. And overall, you know, it's just a really, really strong deck. I mean, I know there are some versions that they're maybe cutting the Coulson, and I've seen She-Hulk in it as well. I think that can definitely have, you know, definitely make some sense. But ultimately, I think that this is probably the best version of the deck right now, simply for those reasons I said. Additionally, if you storm that lane, you can still reach it with Dr. Doom. So it's not, you know, it's not like you're done there and that's it. If you get your Dark Hawk down or your Rock Slide or even White Queen, you're putting a decent amount of power there just with Storm and Rock Slide. That's 8 power on 2 cards. That already feels good, and then you can add Dr. Doom for 5 if you play him on 6. So overall, a really, really fun deck. You know, it kind of at times feels like it plays itself. You know, you go Korg on 1, you go either Zabu or Sentinel on 2, as those are your only 2 drops. 3, it's probably Coulson, you know, or Storm. In this case, 4 is, you know, it depends on what you played. If you played Coulson, you're probably gonna play, you know, maybe you're playing White Queen, or maybe, you know, maybe you're playing Dark Hawk if you stormed. This deck feels like it plays itself, and it's strong enough to do that. So overall, another huge component of the meta right now. Luckily, you're not running into it as much, and I think that's because Patriot has started to kind of take over. I was surprised that Patriot wasn't the most popular deck in the meta, with that going to the Sandman Electro deck. But yeah, I mean, this deck is super strong, can compete with both of those, and I think this is a really, really good deck to play. But let's get on to, I think we're on our last one here. And we are on our last deck here in the meta, and honestly, I was surprised by this one. I had never played it, so I had to go and test it myself, and I could see it. I could totally see why this deck is starting to make some noise, right? You've got Sunspot, you've got Nightcrawler. Those are your 1-drops. Sunspot, super strong. Nightcrawler, he's reaching those lanes. I love both those inclusions. 2-drops, Scorpion, Lizard. Scorpion, I feel like, you know, he's so strong even though he's only a 2/2. A lot of times people aren't playing on 1, so you're hitting a bunch of their cards, and Scorpion just feels good coming down. Whenever he gets played against you, you're always like, oh, well, that's annoying. Well, now you get to do it. You've also got Lizard as a turn 2 option. Super strong card. It forces them to either commit, or you're probably winning that lane. 3-drops. You got Mr. Fantastic and Wave. Mr. Fantastic, again, another really, really nice card. Potentially a 3/6, at a minimum a 3/4. So overall, you know, that's pretty good power there. Wave, you're not playing until turn 5 typically. Totally makes sense, which we'll get to in a second. Shang-Chi, I talked about how much I like Shang-Chi and the fact that he answers, you know, big problems that other decks can put out there. So I think Shang-Chi is huge. The one thing I would potentially say here is there aren't as many decks going tall as they are wide. And the fact that we're only running Sunspot and Nightcrawler in this version, you know, I would consider Killmonger just as, you know, potentially a turn 6 play to take out those Patriots and things like that. But I totally get the Shang-Chi, and you know, I haven't experimented with this one too much. White Queen, you know, 4/6. You're seeing her in yet another deck, and I think she brings more than just the 6, right? Because she's also giving you info on what your opponent is doing. Arrow, I feel like, is a natural inclusion when Wave is in your deck, especially if you're playing Wave on 5. Then we've got Dr. Doom, Chavez, and She-Hulk as our 6-drops, right? So what's really, really cool, if you go Wave on 5, and that's it, right? You float those other 2, everything becomes a 4 cost. We already know that. Well, She-Hulk, because you floated those two, also now drops down, right? Now she only costs 2. So you could play She-Hulk in combination with a Doctor Doom, or with a Chavez, or with an Arrow, and make sure that you win a crucial location and pull their things away, or reach those other locations with Doctor Doom. So I could totally see why this deck is doing work. It feels fun to play. It feels really, really flexible, like you've got options. And that's one of my biggest things in decks. I want to feel like I've got more than one way to win. I don't want to have to rely on, getting that Galactus down or something like that. I want other win conditions, and this deck feels like you have multiple. So this was a surprise to me. It's one I wasn't really aware of. I might end up doing a video solely on this one because it feels that good. But overall, those are the 5, 6, 7 decks that are most common in the meta right now. You guys will probably end up running into them a few times over the weekend, or maybe you're going to try one of them out. If you do, let me know. And if you've hung out till now, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. If you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and like the video as well. But until next time, have some fun.